Today I'm going to show you how to make deliciously soft and chewy sourdough bagels. We're going to start with 275 grams of lukewarm filtered water. To that we're going to add 24 grams of sugar, whisk that together to dissolve, and then we're going to add starter. It's important that your starter is bubbly and active. Make sure you can see plenty of bubbles in there, and then add 150 grams of starter to the water. Add 500 grams of bread flour, and I'm using Keen Arthur bread flour. Because of the high protein content, this flour works really well. Using a stand mixer fitted with a dough hook attachment, we're going to knead these bagels on low speed until incorporated, and then we're going to increase the speed and knead for an additional 4 or 5 minutes until the dough comes together in a smooth ball. Work the dough into a semi-smooth ball. The dough is really stiff, so this is tricky, but just do the best you can. Then grease the bowl, replace the dough into the bowl, cover with a piece of plastic wrap, and let it rise overnight. This generally takes about 10 to 12 hours, but it might take longer or shorter depending on temperature. What you're looking for is for the dough to double in size and look like this. Next, we're going to add our salt. I have 14 grams of fine sea salt. I'm going to add a little bit of water just to help it start dissolving. Then we move the dough onto the counter, spread the salt over the surface of the dough, and knead gently to incorporate. Now this is a little bit tricky because the dough is stiff and doesn't really want to accept the salt, but just do the best you can. I like to pick up a portion of the dough from the top, fold it down on itself, rotate it 90 degrees, and repeat the same process full circle. After about a minute of kneading, you can see the dough looks kind of smooth, but if you get up close, there's little salt pockets, and I'm still feeling salt granules in this dough, so I need to go longer. And then if this happens, don't worry. This looks like disaster, but it's just a big salt pocket in the dough and needs to get kneaded more. Keep repeating this process until you no longer feel any salt granules in the dough. After you've kneaded the dough until it is completely smooth and no longer feel salt granules in it, it's ready for the second rise. Work it into a nice, smooth, cohesive ball and return it to the bowl for an additional 2-3 hours, possibly longer, possibly shorter depending on temperature. What you want to see is the dough will be very puffy and almost double in size. Once your dough is ready, we're ready to shape. We need a large baking sheet lined with parchment paper, grease with some cooking spray. You'll need a bench scraper, a kitchen scale, and a damp towel. I'm going to divide the bagels by weight, and to do this, I'm going to remove the dough from the bowl, place the bowl on the kitchen scale, zero out the bowl's weight, return the dough to the bowl. That will give me how much my dough weighs. Then I can divide the dough weight by how many bagels I want. Now I want 6 bagels out of this dough. That makes a pretty nice sized bagel. You can also do 8 for a slightly smaller bagel. I like to work with 1 bagel at a time. Tuck the ends under itself and then roll it together to create a nice tight round shape. The top of the bagel should be smooth and there should be a seam on the very bottom. If you have little pieces of dough that you need to add to the bagel, just tuck those underneath. Cover the bagels on the baking sheet with the damp towel while you work with the other ones. This will make sure they don't dry out. Now I'm doing a double batch, so I have a dozen bagels here. We're going to let the gluten relax for 10 to 15 minutes. Once they've relaxed, we can make them look like bagels. So we're going to poke our finger down in the very center of the bagel, insert our finger from the other side, and then just barrel roll it, gently stretching that hole open until we have a nice bagel shape. Spread it out, lay it on the pan, and repeat with the remaining bagels. After they are shaped, they need to rest and rise for about half an hour, but again, this depends on temperature. It could take up to an hour, it could take as little as 20 minutes. You just want to see the bagels look puffy. Preheat the oven to 450 degrees and get water boiling. I'm going for about 9 to 10 cups of water. Bring it to a rolling boil, and I'll add about 20 grams of honey. Now, pretzels boil in baking soda and water. So what's the difference? Can you boil bagels in baking soda? Well, the answer is yes, you can, and I did a little test. The bagel on the left is boiled in baking soda water. The bagel on the right is boiled in honey water. The bagel boiled in baking soda was much darker, as you can see, and the crust was crisp and almost shattered, as opposed to the one on the right where it was soft, chewy, and golden brown. For toppings on these bagels, I'm going to be using everything seasoning, some coarse salt, I'm using kosher salt, and some sesame seeds. I'm going to separate an egg and whisk up the egg white I'll paint this onto the bagels before applying the seeds, which will prevent the seeds from scattering all over the kitchen when you cut into the bagels later on. Once the bagels are puffy, they are ready to boil and bake. Our water is boiling, so I'm going to transfer 3 bagels at a time into the pot. Let them boil for about 15 to 20 minutes per side and then flip them over and repeat. Then remove them from the pan onto the baking sheet and repeat with the remaining bagels. To put toppings on the bagels, I'm going to brush the egg white over the surface and then sprinkle with seeds and tap them on to make sure that they adhere to the bagel. Alternatively, you can brush the top of the bagel with egg white, invert them into a bowl of your toppings, and then invert back onto the baking sheet. Once your bagels are boiled and topped, they're ready for the oven. To decrease the heat to 425, bake them on the center rack and bake them for about 20 to 25 minutes until they're golden brown. The bagels should feel light when you pick them up, and when you tap them, they sound hollow. Remove them to a wire rack to cool. Give them a few minutes and then these bagels will soften up. Once cooled completely, these bagels will be oh so soft, deliciously chewy with a slight hint of sourdough tanginess. Using this recipe, you can make several different varieties of bagels. Everything bagels, you can make mixed seed bagels, sesame seed bagels, salt bagels, and of course plain bagels. You can even add things to the dough to make flavored bagels like blueberry bagels or cinnamon raisin bagels. To ensure that you get great bagels every time, I have a few tips for you. Make sure to use a bubbly active starter. Here's a time lapse of a starter going from the feeding process. Several hours later it rises and falls. When it's at its peak, that's when you want to make bread. Second tip is use a stand mixer. This is critical to making these bagels soft and chewy. Third tip is add salt after the bulk rise. Salt can inhibit yeast growth. By adding the salt after the bulk rise, we let the sourdough starter get a jump start on raising that dough, which translates into a better bagel. And finally, boil the bagels, but just long enough. 15 to 20 seconds per side is plenty. Baking with sourdough is a journey. This is how my first bagels looked. You can see that they're kind of thin, their edges were crispy, and they were kind of dense on the inside. But now they're much more fluffy, they're golden brown, they're soft, deliciously chewy with a slight tang of sourdough. So give this recipe a try and let me know how it goes for you in the comments below.